Sorry guys for the delay. Good morning. So as we start our power talk, first off, thank you, Antonio, for the good emceeing you have done so far, getting us started. Our two presenters today, I will just introduce them first, and then we'll have our speaker who is going to show us her presentation, and then her partner in business is also going to give us a few highlights. Then you guys get to ask them questions. So allow me to introduce to you Monica Malakwen. She is an interior designer by profession. She has over 10 years of experience, postgraduate experience. She also has 7 years running her own design firm, Indulgence Designs, where she's the business head, and she has done quite amazing projects which you'll get to see in the profile I'm going to pass around. And then also she has a passion for students and for mentorship, and she'll show you her online programs where over 2,600 participants already benefit from. So I'm hoping that all of you also will sign up and benefit from the pointers that she gives through her online mentorship programs for interior designers under her page, Indulgence Blueprint. So she'll tell you more about that also. And then we also have from her office, Ruth, who is a business development manager at Indulgence Designs. She'll also give you her day-to-day experience of being in the interior design industry. Now you get to learn the practical skills that takes for you to actually practice as an interior designer. So karibu, Monica, let's just set up your PowerPoint. In the meantime, these profiles can go around. Take a look at her projects that she's done, and we're looking forward.
I think maybe
Okay, hi. Good morning. How are you? Okay, I've heard you being asked how and why and if you're excited being a designer, but I would like to just confirm from you guys, who is excited to be a designer? Awesome. I'm also an interior designer, as she's mentioned. My name is Monica Malakwen. I'll tell you a short story, then we can start the presentation. It's about me being a designer. Unlike some answers I've had, by the time I went to campus, I didn't know about interior design. I got to know about interior design through a presentation like this one. I had already come into college and we were doing the orientations. I hope you do them. And the design HOD was doing a presentation and I was excited about it, never heard about it. But then within me, I felt like this was what I wanted to do, and I went right into it. And I'm excited that whether you chose to be an interior designer early enough or you ended up being a designer by one way or the other, I'll encourage you and tell you that there is no better time to be a designer in this country. This is the right time. The market has really opened up and you guys are up for great things. So get excited about it. You're in the right place. So we'll go right into it. Okay. Yes. So our topic today is contract management for interior designers. With me, Monica Malakwen. Yeah, that's me. And I am an interior design expert. I like to say I help convert interior spaces into functional and beautiful places to work and also to live in. Okay. So briefly about my journey in the interior design industry. I graduated from Maseno University with a degree in interior design back in 2012. Yes, so that is 10 years from the time, actually we're in the 11th year since I graduated from interior design school. In 2018, Indulgence Designs, which is my interior design practice, was incorporated. It had been running for 2 years earlier, registered as a business name, and you guys will get to know about those names, a business name, incorporation, and all that. Yes, so the company was incorporated in 2018, and I became an interior design director. In 2020, I launched a training program because of a passion that I have for interior design students, especially because there is a gap in the transition process from college and then to the market, and actually also from the practicing as an employed interior designer and then finally going into your own practice. There's also a gap there. And also, I really believe the quality of your interior space determines the quality of your life, and therefore I also give free interior design lessons to laymen. I know we are professionals here, but out there is a massive need, and I know you guys will understand that there are simple things that anybody can do to improve their interior spaces. Yes, so those are the lessons that I give to help them be able to improve their spaces. You know, how to hang curtains, how to mount wall art, and if you will be interested in helping out with some of those content, just share your content, free share what you know, and it helps people out there. And eventually, in 2022, I became published as an author. And yes, the book is right here with me. It's called Wealth Footprints. If you'd be interested to look at it, you can also look at it in due time. Yes, so that is the journey I have been through that qualifies me to call myself an interior design expert. It is a journey, it is achievable, and take strides one at a time, and eventually your career path is just going to open up for you. Yes, so this gives a short summary of who I am. I am an interior design expert. I am a director at Indulgence Designs Limited. I lead a community called Indulgence Blueprint, where I offer interior design lessons to thousands of awesome people to help them become experts in their own spaces. But when I'm not creating, when I'm not a designer, I am a homemaker. My hobbies, they range from cooking, baking, gardening, and sewing. Okay? I have 2 wonderful children, a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I'm excited to be here with you guys today. Yes, so if you can get your phones and search, it's called Indulgence Blueprint. It's a Facebook group. You can ask to join, you'll be let in, and you'll be able to see what I've been able to do in the past. And as I asked earlier, if you'd be willing to participate in, giving content, you're also welcome to do that. Something just happened there. Okay, we'll skip that. But in sometime last year, I got a chance to be interviewed for a live TV program, and we're just talking about interior design and how to make, spaces better, again, based on what I have been teaching in the Facebook group. I was recognized by Kinseed as an interior design expert earlier last year as well, and I came to do external examination for a class that was happening at that time, and it's because of that and many other things that I'm here today, and we will be talking about contract management for today. So that is a bit of the introduction. So what is a contract? Yes.
Contract is an agreement between 2 parties.
Okay, that's a very good answer. Who wants to add something to it? Yes.
Contract is the terms and conditions that that 2 or 3 parties sign when you're either starting a project or you're doing a project or whatever is happening. So it's a document that you sign before you start.
Okay.
Finish a certain activity, a certain task.
Okay. You're right. So a contract is a legally binding document. When we say legally, it means it can be enforced by law, okay? Yes. It also specifies the terms of engagement between the different parties. It's between two or more people or entities. When I say entities, it means it could be between companies, it could be between different people, but you cannot have a contract by yourself. It has to involve more than one person, and as I said earlier, it is enforceable by law. So, how do interior designers use contracts? I will be talking to you mostly about my own experience and how we use it in our practice. Yes, so there could be many other ways, but when you get to a point of signing a contract, mostly it is because you have come to a point where you're now making a commitment. When you get a contract in the interior design industry, normally you would have gone through a process where you have done the designs, you have probably done the quotations, and depending on the kind of practice you go into, there are very many ways you can do. You can be a consultant where you actually have to sign those contracts before you start the work, because it's an agreement between the client that they have given you the job to do, and they commit to it by signing that contract. But in the kind of business I do, where we do design and build, it's normally a process where you do the designs, you do the quotations, and you agree with the client and say, this is what we want to do, this is how we want to achieve it, and then by that point, you then sign a contract committing to your agreement. Yes. Also, once you've signed a contract, this contract usually becomes the reference of your engagement, because the contract will usually detail all the things that you like, the scope of work, what are you going to be doing in this project. It details all those things. So in the future, if you need to know what a particular project was about, you can always refer to the contract. We always also do an appendix to the contract where we do the quotation, we appendix the drawings, and we also appendix the work plan, because as you do a contract, you also need to agree on the timelines, and you say in this project will be executed probably in 6 weeks. And in those 6 weeks, we do a work program that shows what we do each specific day until the end of the project. What also happens with a work plan is there is normally, if you're doing payment terms, for us we would say, like, let's say 40% down payment before work begins, and then we do another 40% at 70% of the works, and the last payment after the work is complete. The work program helps you to know how far you are in the project, and that way it's clear between you and the client that we've been able to achieve this milestone, and now it's time for the second installment. Yes, so the contract becomes a very good reference document for that. And eventually, a contract is always a proof of work, because when you're bidding for future projects, you want to show evidence that you actually executed that project, that you actually go to do that project. There are companies that will give, is a problem? Okay, yes, so there are companies that will give an LPO, but eventually there are some companies where we commit to the work using a contract, and that is evidence enough in the future when you need to bid for another job and you want to provide evidence that you are the one who did that particular project, you are able to use your contracts. So those three major reasons are why we actually do contracts in our business. So when you have the contract, we like to believe that at the point of signing the contract, that is where the project begins. Okay? So for you to be able to deliver on what you promised to do, there are some things, specific things you need to do in order for you to have successfully managed that contract and delivered it efficiently and effectively. There are a few elements that you must include in a contract, and maybe later on I can show you a sample contract. that we use in our company, but there are elements that you must include in that contract for it to be effective. And contract management starts from way before the contract is executed. There is the planning stage. As you set up your practices and even as you come to interact with contracts, you'll find that there are contracts that are 10 pages documents and they have quite a bit of detail. There are contracts that are just a one-page document and they still encompass the same thing. So depending on the complexity of the project, depending on the companies, different companies you are working with, you'll find that there will be different things that will be required to be in a contract. But over time for us, we've been able to tweak our contracts. Ours is a 2-page and it's been efficient because we've been using it over and over again. We have added, removed, and eventually have a contract document that works for us and also works for our clients. And I think at the point where we are right now, we no longer really need to do a new contract every time we need to do a contract for a client. It is a process, and eventually you get to come to a document that works for both the parties. Yes, so the first element is the parties. It would be an agreement between Indulgence Designs and KenSeed, okay? Yeah, so there has to be always the first element is this contract is drawn between these and these parties. It also indicates from like the effective date, okay? So this contract is being entered between these two parties on this particular day. It then details the scope. What are we, getting into a contract for? We are getting into a contract for painting the office. We are getting into a contract for construction of a borehole, whatever it is, but it has to detail the scope. And in that scope, I said earlier, we like to attach the quotation because it would have detailed everything that is in that contract. Are we together? Yes. So that is the scope. It's very important because you don't want to come to a point where the client is telling you, I expected you to do this and you did not do it. At the same time, maybe you neglected it, you didn't think it was necessary, but the client was expecting you to do it. So it's very important for you to be able to actually have that, okay? Yes, the scope clearly detailed. Also, you need to indicate in your contract the cost of the project, the total cost of the project, and also the payment schedule, if you have any. There are companies that do 100% payment, and that is also a schedule. You're saying we are taking 100% payment before the job starts. Depending on the size of the project, for us, if the project is under $1 million, we would do 60% and then 40%. If it is a bit lower, probably we'll take 80-20, but most of the time, when the projects are above $1 million, we will do 40% down payment, 40% at 70%, and then 20% when the project is complete. I'll give you a tip and why we do that. I'm full disclosure because I'm trying to help you. The 20% that is paid after the project is done would usually be a profit. So you want to take care of your expenses 100%. You're not sponsoring a client's project. Yeah? You're not sponsoring a client's project. And even if you are going to have any hardships, eventually recovering your payments, at least you didn't go into your pocket to be able to do the project. Yes. And it makes it easier, especially the second payment at 70%. Normally, at 70%, the project is somewhere close to the end, but then the client is not still able to use the space. And we are all selfish humans. Yeah, so when they still need the space, the client is much more likely to pay faster than you stacking up most of your payment towards the end. So yeah, that is why we do that. Okay. Also in it, you need to indicate your terms, like the terms of service. So many dynamics happen when a project starts. Sometimes you'll find that you agreed on the drawings, you agreed on the quotation, you actually even signed the contract, but at the point the project begins, you find that the client will come and tell you, let's make a few changes. Remember, you have a timeline, remember you have a budget. How does that affect your work? So you need to indicate in your contract, in case the client changes the scope of work, what happens? In case you as the designer delays the project, what happens for the client? And what we say in our contracts is, in case the project has to delay on our side, the payment delays in an equivalent kind of time. That makes the client very comfortable because they care about their money at that point, because there are times when it's beyond your control. But you need to have that in your contract to cover yourself in case of such kind of things. And eventually, of course, the signatures. The contract is only valid if it's signed by both parties. Are we together? Yes. So you've been given the job, you have your contract, your contract ready, and you are ready to begin the project. Projects are usually executed by project managers, and therefore for us, the contract manager is usually the project manager. And in our company, project managers are usually interior designers. So if you are going to be hired in Indulgence Designs, your contract will say interior designer stroke project manager, because it's a role you have to do. So as early as now, just start preparing your mind on what it means to actually be a project manager, because it's an integral part of being an interior designer. Most of us are self-trained project managers, actually by experience, because the moment you get into the market, you just have to start managing projects. So one of the very important skills you need to have for you to be an effective project manager is actually being a very, very good communicator, okay? Because a project would, there are so many parties involved in it. There is the client, being your first contact, is given you the job, now you need to do it. Apart from the client, you will have the technicians, the subcontractors, you will have the suppliers. All these people have to be put together in a way that makes the running of the project efficient. If materials delays, definitely the work will delay. If the fundis are not motivated, probably the outcome of your project will not be as good. Okay? So you have to be very effective in your communication, and you will actually spend 90% of your time on phone. You will be talking and coordinating and planning and being, responsible, answerable to your office, answerable to the client, to the supplier, and everybody, and even the property managers of the building, to the city council. Yeah, all those are people that come into play when you are executing a project. So you need to be very effective in communication. You also have to be very good at scheduling and time management, because one delay would cause a delay in the entire project. Some of these projects, and actually most of them, are usually time-bound. Somehow clients come to us when they already have a very short time to the end of the project. So you have to be very, very efficient in managing that time. You have to be able to foresee challenges and actually be able to mitigate them. You need to plan, like really plan. We normally do material schedules from site to the office, and we like to tell our project managers that you need to be able to plan for the week in advance, so that if you will be needing materials on Friday, let's know that by Monday or Tuesday, so that even if there would be a delay in delivering those materials, it won't be able to stop your work. So you need to be able to schedule and to be a very good time manager. You also need to be very good in negotiations. You need to be able to be very effective in that, because a lot of times you are the office's contact on site, okay? So the client will come and will give you changes. They'll tell you things that were not in the contract. at that point, you are not supposed to tell the client, we cannot do that, okay? You should be able to negotiate it in a way that the client feels like they were listened to. In as much as you may not actually fulfill what they wanted you to do, make them feel like you listened, you understood them, okay? So you just have to keep negotiating, even for you to be able to motivate the fundis, as I said earlier. You need to be able to negotiate with them and actually just make them motivated and feel like they are part of this and they want to deliver together with you. And eventually you need to be very good in problem solving. Problems will always arise. You don't want to be reactive. You want to be proactive. You want to anticipate them again early enough, and so that you can be able to plan. You need to be a critical thinker, because sometimes you may not have so much time to handle a problem. You have to be able to think on your feet and actually be able to solve that problem. And that's it. I will take questions.
Before you ask your questions, I have a question myself. What happens when we sign a contract with a client? I do the work, but the client does not pay. What happens now?
One of the advantages of doing a contract is it is enforceable by law. And normally the contract will have a clause indicating the terms of payment and what happens in case the client doesn't pay. And in most of the cases, we prefer to negotiate with the client most of the time. We really avoid, and in the about 7 years that we've been in business, we've never had a case where we actually had to go to court. Most of the time when the client doesn't want to pay, it's usually because they'll always have a reason of not wanting to pay. Most of the time they'll tell you you didn't deliver on this. There are cases where you actually have to go into your pocket a bit to make sure that that client is satisfied. Of importance is satisfying your client. We normally have a document, we call the handover document. When at the end of the project, we will bring a document to the client that indicates that the project is done. It was done within timelines and to the full satisfaction of the client. Before you get the client to sign that document, of course there will be that paint, haikufanya nini, they'll bring up a few issues. We address them, and when we eventually get the client to sign that document, most of the time we'll have our payments without any problems. But we have a client who's not paid for the last 2 years, and they are in serious financial trouble, actually. It's a big company, I'm sure all of you know it. And at this point, they haven't even been able to pay their staff for the last probably 5-6 months. So in such a case, yeah, you may count bad debts, but then remember, as I said earlier, we try as much as possible to have gotten all our payments, like all the money that we incur in the project, and normally what you would lose in such a case would be the profits. Yeah, so there will be losses in the industry. I will not lie to you that it's all roses. If you want to go the court way, why we avoid that as particularly is because when you bid for future projects, they would normally have a clause where they ask you if you have any litigations. Okay? And they are trying to determine whether you are most likely to take them to court. So we don't want to have that, unless it's, of course, absolutely necessary. Yeah.
Question?
Yes.
Quick question. My name is Antonio. what if the first payment is done, the second payment is done, but during the final presentation, as in you're presenting to your client your work, they are not happy with it? What will happen from that? Like they say, no, I don't like this color, or I don't like the tiles. What will happen from there? And yet maybe she said or he said, the tiles, I wanted them to be this pattern, and then you got that pattern, but I end up changing in the process, or in the final look they're like, they don't like it completely. What will happen with that, or how will you deal with that?
Okay, that's a good question. What we normally do is we handle client expectations from the beginning. The client doesn't come to site the last day like it's a big reveal. Okay, so we normally walk the journey with the client. The first step is normally, as I said earlier, the drawings. You give them detailed drawings showing what you're going to be executing, and I'm sure you people do 3Ds, so at least the client has an image of what they would expect at the end of the project. I know sometimes the 3Ds we do, your render in terms of color may be different from what you choose as a color code while you're painting. There's a process we call sample approval. So once we've agreed on the project, we're now going to be doing tiles. Okay? We bring the tiles to site and we ask the client to approve. We normally do like 3 options for tiles. We bring them to site. If we are doing cabinetry, and we are using different types of boards again, we bring them to site, and in some cases, depending on the magnitude of the project, actually have the client sign on the samples. This is what we've chosen. Okay? You put that away, you buy it, you execute the project. As you go through the process of the project, we normally would have, depending on the magnitude of the project, weekly site meetings where the client would come, see what is going on, and most of the time, and that is why there is the clause of changes on the contract, because they actually happen. The client will come to site and think, probably this room is too big. You'll find the director saying, no, I don't want to use this office, is too big, I'll use this other room, let's make this the boardroom. Those changes actually happen on site, and we have them communicated officially on email, and the client affirms them. Towards the end of the project, there's something we call a snag list. We are 70%, by the time actually we are talking about 70%, most of the work is usually done, the entire space is painted in white, and we bring the color chart. And sometimes the client cannot comprehend the color chart. So, okay, we propose that we are going to paint this wall in yellow. We'll buy a liter of yellow paint and do a sample. The client comes and will actually see that color and say, Apana, this is too yellow, let's just keep it white. Those changes actually happen. So you take the client through the process. When you are 90%, painting is usually continuous even after the client has come in, but at about 90 or 95%, the client will come in and you will go through what we call a snag list. So this is the quotation. We were supposed to do 1, 2, 3, 4. Are they done? The client will go through the space and pick out faults. You see, you'll always notice a fault. This wasn't done well, this wasn't done well. Those ones, we list all of them. And it helps us to be able to address the client's objections well in advance. So, as the client points out, we do a snag list and we write it down. That is again the responsibility of the contract or the project manager on site. You do that list and then you implement it, you execute it. So the next, on the handover meeting, you'll not be going through the entire project, you'll be going through the snag list, which is the items the client had pointed earlier at about 95% of the project. And that is how we've managed to have our clients just sign off easily without so much trouble. Yeah.
My name is Mike. So my question is, does the size of the project determine the necessity of a contract?
To answer that question, I'll say yes and also no, because every project, regardless of the size, needs a contract, needs an agreement, okay? Of course, there could be smaller projects that you will be able to do in a week, and they may really not need such a commitment in terms of contract. But remember, the three reasons I said you needed a contract. You may need that contract for you to actually be able to prove that you did work for that particular client. Because if you've seen the profile, if it's come to you already, you will see that we have a list of clientele. And by the time we get to put a client in such a document that will be all over the place, you want to be able to actually say, this is my client because this is what I did for them. You'll find that in some projects, actually most of the time, and especially since we are in the corporate space, they normally do what we call the LPO, the local purchase order. In the cases where we have the LPO, it suffices and we do not do contracts. Okay? So that LPO is the contractual document between the designer and the client. Yeah.
Hi, my name is David. I have heard you mention about delays. For instance, there is delay on you as the service provider to meet the client. For instance, I'll give you an example. Once I worked in a construction company, and we were doing a renovation for a restaurant. And then there was a delay on our side as the service provider. And then once I overheard that the client needed to be paid as per profits that were lost during the time recovered. So how do you tangle that? Thank you.
Okay, as I mentioned, there's usually the terms of the contract, and there's been a lot of cases where the contractors actually just don't deliver on their job, and most of that has resulted to the client adding a clause which indicates that if you delay the job by this number of days, you're charged in this kind of manner, and those charges are usually a lot. So that you need to make up your mind before you sign such a contract if it is something that you're actually confident to be able to deliver within those timelines. Because you'll find that sometimes actually the timelines are unreasonable, and it's just the contract is just punitive from the word go. At that point, you have the legal right to decline such a contract. But if you then go ahead to sign it, you need to have assessed yourself, assessed your team, assessed the project, and be confident that you'll actually be able to deliver, okay? And once you've done that, what we talked about earlier about effective time management. If a project was going to take you 2 weeks, for example, and you have to deliver it within a week, what do you need to do? You anticipate that the timelines are tight. Do you then need to work 24 hours a day? Because we've had cases where we've actually had to work around the clock. We've had projects where we needed to work at night because, I mean, BBC is right under us, and it's a live broadcast studio. It then means you have to work when they are offline. You have then to get their program and plan your team around that. So if you are able to assess the timelines of the project and actually make sense of it and say this one we can deliver, then you have to have planned your team. What I normally like to do is give ourselves like a third of the project. So that if the project is going to be done in 4 weeks, we deliver that project in 3 weeks. We just anticipate that I'll sign the contract saying we are doing this project in 4 weeks, but then as I sit with my team to say this project is being flagged off, the timelines on the table is 3 weeks, okay? That gives you that extra week, and the time increases as the project size increases, okay? So if it's double the time, then you are also doubling the extra time that you need at the end of the project. The reason we do this, they are dynamics beyond your own control. You could order glass and something happened and they were not delivered on time. Maybe the machines, I don't know. There are so many dynamics in the market. You need to be able to cover yourself for that. But in the case that you're not able to, you've anticipated that you will not be able to deliver on that within that timelines, the same contracts that normally have that clause will also have another clause that will release you. In that, you will need to communicate early in advance, probably 2 weeks earlier, tell the client, as it is, we will not be able to deliver this project in that timeline. We request another week in writing. And if they approve that, then you are safe from that clause of the contract. Okay? Yes, so you anticipate and address it early in advance. It is what we were talking about, problem solving. Yeah. The contracts are usually between us. Yes. So if the two of us agree on something and we have it down on paper and sign it, that is enforceable.
Let's say you get a county job to do a retrofit, for example. So government now, they have their own contracts they impose on you.
Yes.
You just agree to the term.
Yes.
You have an option to change this.
Yes, and that is why I was saying, sometimes look at that contract. Does it serve your purposes? If it doesn't, yes. Actually, for us, for the period of time we've been in business, we've not done business with the government. We just consciously chose that this is not our scope. We are not willing to finance someone's project. Because usually for the government projects, you have to actually execute, and then most of the time you sign certificates. So it is, they'll come and assess the project and tell you you've done 20%, so they pay you 20%. You do the next 20%, maybe even 80%, and no one comes to site to do the assessment. And that is why you find most of the government projects stalling, because it's now a push and pull between the contractor and the government. They are not agreeing on the percentages done. Yeah, so there are some people who have the bone for it. Maybe we will get there in the future, but for now, we've avoided government projects. There was a question? Yes.
So my question is, what if the client, maybe they want a space to make it an Airbnb, and you've done the 40%, they've paid the first 40%, and then maybe their money flow like just flops, like they don't have money anymore. What do you do from there? Because you have to stop now because the client is saying, I do not have money to fund the rest of the project. So what do you do with such a client?
Okay, depending on what you are doing for the client in such a project, sometimes like the residentials, and I think also Airbnb would fall under such a category, because you will design, okay, you will design and tell them what they are able to do in the space. So were you shopping for the client? Okay. What I would advise you is that 40%, okay, the first payment you get, anticipate what you will need to do with that money to the point where the project reaches. Because if the project then stops and the client says they don't have money, depending on your terms of agreement, did you have a contract? You had a contract. So are they pausing the project for some time? Are they going to be picking it up in future? Okay. I think just as we said earlier about in the case where the client hasn't been able to pay you, the best thing is if you had the terms of payment and you've only come to the point where the client paid up to, and they honestly don't have money, the only problem would be if they actually proceeded behind your back. Yes. But if it's genuine that they don't have money, you can just hold on, as long as you've not had to go into your pocket to be able to do that project. Guys, never fund a client. Never fund a client. It is not your duty. You're in business to make money. Yes. So never go into your pocket to actually do a project for the client. If it gets to a point where you've exhausted the funds they gave you, genuinely, for the purposes of the project, just explain to them nicely, tell them, okay, you gave me this much, this is the percentage we've reached to, we are going to have to pause the project until you can be able to pay the next amount. Yeah.
I'll just speak. I have two questions.
Yes.
We've talked about having a specific timeline for a project, like 4 weeks. So do you include the actual schedule of works in the contract, or you just state that it's going to be 4 weeks? And then the other one is, sometimes you find that the expected budget and the actual budgets are versus the expected budget. So you expected the project to be 2M, then if you get 2.5. Now that the one that is on top, who does the burden fall to be an arrangement of, as a client, the client and you, because you're the one who did the BOQ. So the burden, who does it fall on?
Okay, the first question in terms of the timelines, we normally do a work schedule. So the work schedule, as I said, details. On the first day, we are mobilizing for 2 days, and then we do demolitions for the next 3 days, and then we do partitions, gypsum partition, glass partition, all that. We detail it in a work schedule, and that work schedule normally actually guides us to know how long we'll need, and then that is the timelines we communicate to the client. It also outlines the payment schedule. So you tell the client we're at 70%, and they're able to see in your schedule that by the time you are 70%, you would have done an undercoat in the space.
It's in the contract.
It's in the contract. It is an appendix to the contract. So you have the contract, and then you attach, let me call it an attachment, you attach the work schedule, you attach the quotation, and you also attach the drawings. So that if the client is saying you are supposed to have a partition here, but then your layouts do not show that partition, and it's your responsibility as a designer to explain your designs. Most of the time the client will be a layman, and they'll tell you, that is not what I thought it was. So you also need to take the client through the drawings, and that is why we do 3Ds, so that they can see pictures. They understand that better than the layouts, okay? Yes, so once you've done that and you've explained it to the client and you're now in agreement on what you're doing, and you have all those documents attached, that becomes a binding document. And when you're signing your contracts, please have the client sign on all those, the quotations, sign on the drawings, and also sign on the work schedule. Okay? The second part of it, unfortunately, you are the one who did the BOQs, and unless there was a change, there was an addition of scope, unfortunately, you'll have to bear it. And your quotation will bind you to it, okay? But then there have been cases where it is genuine human error. Okay, I'm talking about maybe you calculated square meters, we do quotations with square meters because it can be verified. So you did a partition and you said it was 10 square meters. It is the same partition on the layout, but then once you've executed, it actually turns out to be 20 square meters. It is your mistake, but you are able to tell the client, well, we made a mistake here, what do we do? We've had a case where we did a carpet and the square meters was less by almost half. And we just went back to the client and said, you know what, there was a mistake because this is what we did, and we were able to do what is it called? An amendment to the contract, where we now did a new quotation in effect to the difference, and we attached it to the contract, appended by both parties. That happens if you notice it in advance and you explain it to the client in advance. You do not wait until the project is over and then you tell the client, you know what, I quoted 2 million, but I used 2.5, so you need to pay me more. They'll not be able to do that.
What if it comes now less than the budget?
Good for you.
Because we have to pay.
Yes. Actually, most of the time, the client never gets to know how much you spent on the project. And sometimes you'll find that you go on a loss on one item and you make more on another item. Maybe you quoted, for example, the carpet and then Thailand carpeted a sale. That's good for you, yeah. You do not have to tell the client, so I went and found they were selling it for half, so here is extra money for you. No, yeah.
So hi, I'm back. Yes, just a question for you. For the 7 years of experience, how have you been able to maintain your name so that you can get the clientele? Like for instance, we have seen on your portfolio, and then I guess you've just confused me more when you say that we are not funding, don't fund clients' project. I'll give you an example. There are these clients who do referrals. Like for instance, for me, I have a cleaning company. It's called Bison Hygiene, and our major client is the government. But in a near future, it's about the name, not really what we are doing and how we execute our works. So I would kindly like for you to clarify on the name part. How have you been able to maintain the 7 years you have been in the industry? Thank you.
I mentioned that the company was incorporated in 2018, but before that the company had been registered, okay? So the first client found us. We didn't look for the client. There is this company who wants to renovate an office, and they know you are an interior designer, so they ask you if you can do it. The advantage was the experience from the previous employer, so we were able to execute that project, and we did a good job at it, and that became our first client. So that by 2019 I had to leave employment because, again, one thing that I would advise you guys, do not attempt to build yourself on your employer's bills. You know what I'm trying to say? So that you're stealing your employer's time, you're stealing your employer's resources, you're using the employer's computers to do your personal projects. In the beginning it will happen and I'll not refuse, but if it comes to a point where you feel like you now are ready to be able to execute your own projects, step out, because I'll tell you for free, most of the people that I've worked with that eventually went out to start their own companies, they did well. I know that is not your question, but just besides the point, yes. So we did a project. One of the things that we really are keen to be able to achieve is to leave a to leave a trail of happy clients. What a happy client does is, number one, they'll give you repeat business. It is in the business world, it's called the front end, back end kind of business structure. The front end is me coming to KenSeed to convince them to actually give me a project. The back end is next time KenSeed calling me because they have another project to do. The front end is actually harder because you need to convince that particular person that you can actually do it. But at the back end, you've already gotten into their system and it becomes almost automatic. Mabati Rolling Mills was a project we did in 2019. Up to now, we've done almost 50 LPOs from the same company. We are probably way above 60 million in revenue from the same company, because now it's just repeat business. So for you to be able to achieve that and to maintain it, be very honest with your client, deliver beyond expectations. Okay, keep your timelines, keep your word, make your word low. If you say I'll deliver tomorrow at noon, whatever it takes, if you have to transnight, do it. Just keep your word. Your reputation is very important, and we live in a very small market where everybody knows the other. Yes, so one mistake, one unhappy client, and your name goes down. And that is why I said earlier, we've had cases where we've lost money because you do not want to come to a place where you're now fighting a client because of any amount of money. It doesn't matter, but you want to be able to make that client willing to pay without any troubles, unless for real they cannot be able to do it. So deliver on your word, be very frank with your clients. One thing that we had a breakfast, we were hosting our clients, and one of our clients said one of the things that really drew them to us was patience. I didn't even think about it at the moment where we were going through, the negotiations and everything, but we were very patient with the client. It matters. It goes beyond your designs. It goes beyond your quotations. It is the personal relationships you feel you get to establish with your clients. And for us, referral marketing has been king. Until this year, we didn't really aggressively market, but you can see the portfolio. It's grown through happy clients. So just deliver. Yeah.
With the 40%, 70%, with the 30%, 70% payment, like the 40%, will that include also your labor fee? It will include, it will just be for the materials that you'll be using?
There are so many ways of doing quotations, but in our structure, we do not separate the material cost from the labor cost. We will tell you, for example, painting this space is, let's say it's 50 square meters, and our charge is 500 per square meter. Within that cost, we've included everything that we will need in terms of labor, in terms of materials, in terms of logistics. Do not forget that part. There's always the logistical part of it. There's always the casuals. In our sites, we have casuals. I'll give you a hint of how we do our quotations. And I'll use an example of cabinets. For example, you're doing kitchen cabinets. We do what we call a material schedule, so that you do a cutting list. I don't know if you guys are familiar. When you're doing a kitchen, you'll always have pieces like you need doors, you need the sides, you need the tops. What that helps you do is to establish the exact materials you will need for that particular project. Okay, once you have the cost of materials, you add your cost of labor, you add your cost of transportation that will actually they have to be taken to site, you add the cost of contingencies. There are things you may not have foreseen, you add that, and then you will say, if, for example, this cabinet will cost me 20,000 to prepare and deliver and fix at the client's place. Out of that project, what amount of money do you want to make? So there's usually the percentage of, let's say you want to make 20% profit. So once you have the cost of the project conclusively, okay, you then add your markup. Yes. So from the beginning, you are almost sure this one I'll get 6,000 bob, because you've already anticipated and covered the cost. That is very helpful at the beginning, but as time goes by, you will realize if it is a 2 meters cabinet, it will cost me 10,000, for example. So you are able to then have a rate and say, we can do at this much per length meter, because you have done the math. So always do the math. If you need to have the fundi help you, because there are times we design and we try to be creative, we do not just keep recreating. So you've designed an element, you are figuring out how to do the construction for that, and you will sit with the technicians and discuss. So here we'll use metal, here we'll use this is what we need. They'll give you a list of materials, and from that you do your markup, and that is how you come up with your quotations. That way you already covered. As she asked, if you overspend, anticipate your costs before you deliver them to the client as a quote. Yeah.
Has she not done a good job? She has. You can give her a round of applause.